What's up guys, Jeff here with Grit City Fitness and Performance. Today I want to talk to you about your hips and hamstrings and quads. Oftentimes I hear people say, hey, I've got really tight hamstrings, I need to go stretch those out. Now, this may be the case for some, but I believe it's a very small amount of people that truly do have hamstring tightness, okay? What people more or less do have is hamstring tension. I use this term because your hamstrings are not tight. They're just they're just holding tension, okay? So let me explain a little bit. With most of us, we sit during the day. We sit at work, so we're in this folded position. We sit while we drive. We sit when we're at home, and we spend a good amount of our day hunched over or slightly even tilted. Now what this creates is, if you guys could see, this forward tilt position here creates a lot of tension in the hips, okay? We also are very quad dominant people. If you notice, your quads are usually very active or tonic. When I say tonic, that means your muscles are tight more often than not, okay? But most likely if you walk around a lot all day, if you wear heels, if you wear shoes that have a slight elevation, you have a little bit of a knee bend throughout the day, which creates, again, tension in the quads, okay? So now taking it back a little bit more, we have the front of our body, which is our hip and our quads, and then we've got our glutes and our hamstrings. Now, everybody says, hey, my hamstrings are tight, so just like I said at the beginning of this. But what ends up happening is as our hips get tight and our quads get tight, we get pulled more and more forward. To correct this, we lean back a little bit. So this is why you also might feel low back pain, but we start to lean back a little bit to counteract that. If we don't, we'll be leaning forward throughout our day. Now, as our hips and quads are tight though, it also pulls our pelvis bone, our hip bone, forward. So it goes into what's called anterior pelvic tilt. As the hip goes into anterior pelvic tilt, we've got what I consider a Donald Duck butt. My hip is slightly up, my hip flexors are tight, and my quads are tight. Now, what this ends up doing is just like overalls. If I had overalls, let's say this was a pair of overalls underneath my feet and on my shoulders. If my overalls were sitting normal like it is now, but I start to pull the front portion of my body, which now this looks like it might be loose, but it's still tight, what happens to the back? It becomes more tight, so more tension, right? So the hamstrings are not actually tight, they just have tension being forced on them or stretching them because of tight hips and quads, okay? So now, what you want to be doing instead of stretching your hamstrings is actually stretching your quads and hip flexors. Those two things will alleviate a lot of tension in your hamstrings, as well as allow yourself to reset your posture and allow you to go from that anterior pelvic tilt to a neutral pelvic tilt, or allow you to reactivate your glutes and allow you to open your hips back up. This will allow you to turn some low back tightness that you might have off, so low back soreness or pain might go away, as well as your hamstrings might relieve some pressure and tension that's being created by the forward posture tilt, or forward pelvic tilt, and allow you to have a better, more neutral posture, okay? This will also allow you to have functioning hamstrings, not tight tensioned hamstrings. So before you start stretching your hamstrings because you think they're tight, spend a good amount of time working the front side of your body, stretching the quads and the hip flexors. Stay tuned for more videos, but a couple good movements that you guys can do for this is just a basic forward hip stretch here. So I'm in a lunge position, my knee is grounded, I might put a pad down, but I basically squeeze my glute, turn my hip forward, and I can either rotate or go into this rising or reaching across. This allows me to stretch more of my hip flexor as well as a little bit of my quad. I can put my foot up. I can do quad stretches here. So just a very basic quad stretch, but this will help. Even just walking lunges, but stretching as I do this will allow me to get some opening in my hips as well as opening in my quads to allow this relief of my hamstrings to subside. All right, so there's a couple solutions for you, but if you're stretching your hamstrings, start stretching your quads and hips instead and see if that makes a difference for you.